Hello, everybody. Once again, I'm Justin Pontarelli, the guy with the crazy beard, and this is actually going to be a Living Sword Ministries video. The title for this video is going to be A Reason for the Hope, Part 1. It is based on the verse from 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. So let me just read that off real quick. From the New King James Version of the Bible. Okay, so now, guys, just a quick heads up. This is not going to be, a Bible-based video. This is just one verse. That's it. Then we're done with the Bible. I'll explain it to you in a moment. So if you're thinking to yourselves, "Oh no, not another Bible video," relax. Once I read this verse off, I'm closing this thing, and we're done for right now. Okay? Then we'll go on to other stuff. But anyway, I'm going to read the verse and then explain why I believe this video and others like it are important. But first, let me, guys, I'm nearsighted. I shouldn't be wearing these for this kind of stuff. Okay, hold on. Already got it open. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks you a reason for the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. So basically, be respectful if someone asks and give a respectful, polite answer with, kindness and all that kind of good stuff. So now you might be asking, well, who's asking? Did anyone ask you for a reason? No one's recently asked me for a reason. Again, I used to be part of a debate and discussion group on Facebook. Group was getting pretty big too. We were around 2,500 members and climbing. Basically, every day we gained members. Okay, we also lost members by the week as well. But it was a controversial group. So controversial, in fact, that it basically got shut down. And the leader of the group, the creator, and myself, basically the second in command, were both kicked off Facebook. Never to be heard from again. It was a group of people in the Philippines that wanted to sue this guy. And I believe the same group of people went after me next. Knowing that they could not attack me and sue me, they just figured they'd probably just go after me on Facebook and get me kicked off. They were successful. But now our group wasn't just about so-called Christian cults. It was also geared to basically anyone that had questions about God or faith or any of those things. You could have discussions about anything you really wanted to in the group. So just today I was just chit-chatting with my mom, and I forgot how this came up. No. Correction, I remember how this came up. Anyway, that's not important. I'm not going to mention why or how, but so the event came back to my head. And I figured, realistically, ever since I was young, I felt this need to kind of defend my faith. Like an apologist. Okay? That's what apologists do. They defend the faith, they give reasons for it, they try to back it up. Now, obviously, Christian to Christian, I can just read off the good book, and that's enough. But in a world where doubt seems to come naturally for people, it's been said, well, you can't quote from the Bible to defend the Bible. It just doesn't work. I agree. It doesn't work. So what am I going to do? Well, first of all, it is true that you cannot simply scientifically you cannot obviously scientifically prove the existence of God, because God is a metaphysical being. It's metaphysical. I can't climb Mount Everest and say, look, there he is, and point up and there's God. I can't do that. I can't hike to New York City and climb the Empire State Building and point up to the clouds and say, hey, there he is. I can't smell him. I can't see him. I can't touch him. I can't taste him. I can't hear him. I've limited all of the main 5 senses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? Science and the scientific method are based upon observation, the 5 senses. What you can see, hear, smell, touch, and taste. If you can't do those things, what do you got? You got nothing. You cannot test or falsify a metaphysical thing, entity, or concept. It cannot be done. Therefore, I think the better question, instead of saying, well, I'm going to try to prove God, I'm going to say, well, why not God? I think in my opinion, if you do not have a better explanation as to things, for example, like, I don't know, the origins of life, yeah, it's going to be about that. That's the video today, guys. The origins of life. So if you're not into like a dry type of thing, you've been warned. Click the dislike button and get out of here. Okay, 1 second. But if you want to know where this is going, I can assure you it's going to a relatively high-level place. I'll try to make the conversation as interesting as possible. I'll try to make the questions relatively thought-provoking. So if you want to hear a thought-provoking thing from me, keep on watching, listening, whatever, right? Okay. That's what I'm going to give you. So, again, although I can't say God exists, here's why, and obviously I can't go to the Bible to say God exists, here's why, especially with non-believers, can't do that. It's not okay with them. So, when I was a kid, I used to think to myself, well, I can prove it. I can prove God exists. Now that I'm getting older, I'm starting to believe, no, I can't prove it, at least not in the way that would work for other people. And I've talked to atheists before, non-believers before. We'll just call them non-believers, okay? I've talked to non-believers before. And the question is always, well, if you have a good argument or some evidence, then let me hear it. In my experience, first of all, number 1, no argument is ever sufficient, and they will accept nothing as evidence. There is nothing that they will accept as evidence. So let me flip it. Let me flip it onto the unbeliever, to the unbeliever instead. So, in my opinion, I've already made up my mind. There's a God. If any unbeliever wants to convince me otherwise, now the burden of proof is on them. But let me go on the offensive and ask this. This is why I have some notes, so, you know. So, how did life come to exist? What was the first form of life on Earth, according to evolutionists? And that's where we have our first answer. And guys, I do apologize if you're familiar with these terms and I butcher them. I'm very sorry. So we have the prokaryote, or prokaryotes. More specifically, bacteria and or archaea cells. Now, if you want to know what a prokaryote happens to be, let me pop that up right now. And guys, I'm going to try to provide all the links to all this information in the description box below. So if you're interested in all these links, I'll have them all below for you, okay? Hold on. So I'll try to label them too. Okay, so here we are. Written by Monsieur Mallory. Okay. From earthfacts.com. Okay. First living things on Earth. First living things on Earth were one-celled organisms known as prokaryotes that came into existence between about 3.5 and 4.1 billion years ago. Now, guys, you know, my view about the age of the universe and Earth is not popular by a landslide. So I'm not going to get into what I believe, but you know, there are Christians that accept old ages for the Earth, and there are those that do not. You can probably guess where I fall. Anyway, continuing on. Prokaryotes do not have a cell nucleus. If you've studied basic biology, you know what a nucleus happens to be, okay? Now, I used to know this stuff, but I've since forgotten most of it, but I could always look it up. But I don't feel like doing that right now. Okay. But as I recall, the nucleus is kind of like the nerve center, I believe, or like basically almost like the brain of the cell. Something like that. Or I could be messing this up completely. Anyway, not important. Cells with nuclei are known as eukaryote cells. Okay, so remember, prokaryotes do not have a nucleus, but cells with the nuclei are known as eukaryote cells. And organisms that have such cells, including human beings, are known as eukaryotes. Okay? When the Earth was first formed, it was extremely hot, blah, 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 blah. Okay? Get the point yet? Okay. Here we are. So, here's the next part of my opinion that, you know, is necessary to read, okay? Hold on, let me just... Okay, hold on. Here we go. There are two types of prokaryotes, bacteria and archaea. Archaea may have been the earliest form of life on Earth. They live in extreme environments, such as hot springs and deep sea vents. The conditions in these environments resemble conditions that existed early in Earth's history. Okay, and that's good enough for right now. Okay, so prokaryotes, we clear, according to evolutionists, first forms of life on Earth. We can accept that. That's fine, right? For the purpose of this video, that's where we're going so far. Prokaryotes. We clear? Great. Bacteria, archaea, no nucleus. Moving on. Back to my notes. Then what was next? Well, that would be the eukaryotes, basically plant and animal cells. Now let's go ahead and get to the differences between the two types of cells. And I forget where that is, but I'll find it real quick. Now, guys, this is not. I mean, there's a lot more to this web page, this article, I guess you could call it. But I'll just read the basics. What I thought was the basics. Okay. And I'll read another one too, okay? Because I think it's very important to define first the difference between a prokaryote type cell and a eukaryote type cell, okay? So like I said, I didn't promise this would be exciting, but just intellectually stimulating, but dry. There's no way to make this exciting at all, I'm sorry. Okay, so now remember, the next life form, or the next form of life on Earth, was supposed to be the eukaryotes. Okay, but let's go through this first. So the difference between the prokaryotic cell and the eukaryotic cell is simple. Eukaryotic cells, again referring to basically plant and or animal cells, have a nucleus surrounded by a nuclear membrane and other membrane-bound organelles that perform specific functions in the cell. These membranes form the endomembrane system, which creates a series of specialized chambers within, the eukaryotic organism that can complete a diverse range of tasks. By contrast, a prokaryotic cell only has a cellular membrane with no membranes extending on the inside of the cell. Basically, if you're interested in what a membrane is, it's basically like, you can think of it almost like skin. It's like a protective layer, basically, okay? Basically, the membrane is the stuff that holds everything inside the cell. All right? There you go. That's just... Again, if you want to look up these terms, you can. It's been a long time since I studied biology, but from what I can understand, it's not like this is not difficult stuff to understand. This, in fact, in my opinion, this is rather simple once you've read it a couple times, okay? No big deal. But let me go even further than this. There's one more page that might give us more details, okay? Hold on. Okay, real quick, here's the article. Just a single little web page, no big deal. Okay? On step-by-step, guide to everything, the difference between bacteria and eukaryotes. In other words, the difference between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells, okay? I'm going to start down here, though, in the second paragraph. I'll just read the rest of the whole thing, because it's not too long, but it's long enough to be boring. So, guys, hang in there, okay? Again, I think it's important to note the differences between the two types of cells. Bacteria belongs to the prokaryotes family of microorganisms. To a first-timer introduced to the world of microorganisms, prokaryotes, bacteria, and eukaryotes may appear similar. However, they are not. They have some basic structural and chemical differences that make them totally different. It is very important to distinguish between them first before any further research in the field. Bacteria, remember that's basically talking about prokaryotic cells, has a cell width much smaller than eukaryotes. Its cell width is less than 2U. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm sure it's not that big, guys. We're talking about bacteria here. Okay? Well, eukaryotes have width between the range of 2U and 100. So they get pretty big, I guess. Okay. Again, I'm not sure what a U happens to be. A U unit? Right about, let me just highlight that. I'm not sure what this happens to be, guys. But it can't be big, okay? But anyway, going on. Bacteria cells are also very simple, and everything happens inside one contained area. Eukaryotes have complex cell structures and different features for each function. These features include mitochondria, chloroplasts, lysosome, and I'm going to totally butcher this, the Golgi apparatus. This is something which the bacteria cells lack. So remember, so basically right here, okay, what this is saying, okay, this is something which the bacteria cells lack. Basically, prokaryotes do not have these things: mitochondria, chloroplasts, lysosome, and the Golgi apparatus. All right? Okay. Moving on. Bacteria cells do have the DNA. Okay, so prokaryotes have DNA, but it is not enclosed in a nucleus. Okay, all right. So remember, no nucleus in a prokaryote. They have a very small size and cannot accommodate one. They also do not have a nuclear membrane either around the nucleus. Okay? So basically no nucleus and therefore no nuclear membrane. Eukaryotic cells, on the other hand, have a nucleus and double nuclear membrane around it. The double membrane separates the DNA from the cytosol. Again, I'm not sure what a cytosol happens to be. I'm sure it's pretty important though, but again, if you guys wanted to look into this further on your own, you could. So, see, now I have to go back to my intro and say, guys, grab a pen or pencil and some notepaper and prepare to take note, because this is not a simple thing, but I think the basics of it are pretty simplistic in my opinion, okay? So if you want to take notes, guys, yeah. This would be the time to start, right? Okay. The DNA of most bacteria cells, again, prokaryotes, have one large circle and several tiny ones. I'm not sure what they mean by tiny circles and large circles. I'm not sure what that happens to mean, but anyway. The tiny ones are called plasmids. They do not have a protein histone. On the other hand, a eukaryotic cell, remember that's again plants and animal cells, has a linear DNA, has chromosomes, and contains protein histone. So now let's just quickly go over this. And this should help, right? And that's it. So bacteria, cells are prokaryotes. They have a cell wall, but do not have a nucleus. The cells have two types of DNA, plasmid and chromosomal. Okay, so there you go, two types of DNA. The chromosomal DNA carries the genetic information, while the plasmid carries the extra information. Most bacteria cells have a flagellum, that little tail thing, guys. I know what that is. Which is a whip-like tail which helps them to swim. And there's a little rough diagram of what this thing might look like, right? So there you go. You got your cell membrane. You got your chromosome, I guess, and your flagellum. And other stuff, okay? No big deal. Moving on. Now this fellow is obviously much more complicated. Eukaryotes are organisms with cells that have membrane-bound nucleus. They have many cell-bound organelles. Eukaryotic cells divide through mitosis and meiosis. Most large organisms are eukaryotes, including animals, plants, and fungi. And here's a rough example of a eukaryotic cell. I'm not even going to try to describe what this thing is or how, I'm not even going to bother. But you can tell from the diagram it's much more complex, okay? And then zooming out again. There they both are on the same screen. So yeah, they look pretty similar, but according to science, they're not similar. Okay, basically not at all. Okay, so going backwards though. So first organism, according to evolutionists, was the prokaryote. Finally, you have the eukaryote. So the idea is that prokaryotes evolved into eukaryotes. And the question is, how did this happen, supposedly? How did a prokaryote, one of these little fellows here, evolve over time into one of these fellows right here? Okay? From, get this now, a bacteria or an archaea type cell into a plant and or animal cell. Yeah. Now guys, I might get a little snippy because this is very... It's a very moving topic for me. Alright, very moving topic. But let's go ahead and read how that supposedly happened, okay? Hold on. So, and this is apparently from Berkeley, I think. Trying to find it. I'm sorry. Hold on. You know, maybe it's not from Berkeley, but that's what I'm seeing up here on my in my bar up there. It says Berkeley. It looks like it says Berkeley. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, let's just read the basics again. From prokaryotes to eukaryotes. Okay, and even up here it says how important is endosymbiosis. Okay, and that's what we're going to look at right now. Living things have evolved into three large clusters of closely related organisms called domains: archaea, bacteria, and eukaryota. Archaea and bacteria are small, relatively simple cells surrounded by a membrane and a cell wall with a circular strand of DNA containing their genes. They are called prokaryotes. Remember, the first organism on Earth, right? Okay. Virtually all of the life we see each day, including plants and animals, belongs to the third domain, eukaryota. Okay, let me just make this a little bigger. There we go. Eukaryotic cells are more complex than prokaryotes. So far, nothing new, right? We've already just went over all this. And the DNA is linear and found within a nucleus. Eukaryotic cells boast their own personal power plants called mitochondria. Guys, this is all like basic biology, more or less, right? Okay? Nothing weird here, okay? Even I accept this stuff. These tiny organelles in this cell not only produce chemical energy, but also hold the keys to understanding the evolution, and this is where I get kind of like, of the eukaryotic cell. Or basically, I think what they mean is the origins of the eukaryotic cell. Because this is where things, in my opinion, get, well, strange. So here's a little diagram. You have your typical prokaryotic cell with your strand of DNA inside of it, and of course, as we learned, the little membrane around the whole thing, right? And then your typical eukaryotic cell with a nucleus, a cell wall, and mitochondria and all sorts of other stuff, right? Okay. Again, basic stuff, nothing too complex. Now here's where things get, well, in my opinion, non-Christian. The complex eukaryotic cell ushered in a whole new era for life on Earth, because these cells evolved into multicellular organisms. Right, okie dokie. That's okay. So that's the idea so far, but that's not what we're talking about today. That's not the topic today. But we're going to keep going anyway. But how did the eukaryotic cell itself evolve? Basically, in other words, asking, how did the eukaryotic plant and or animal cells come to exist? That's what they're asking right here, okay? Get that straight, guys. How did a humble bacterium, in other words, a prokaryotic cell, make this evolutionary leap from a simple prokaryotic cell, there you go, see, to a complex eukaryotic cell? The answer seems... How much further can we zoom? That's the max zoom right there. Seems... What's that word mean, guys? Seems to be symbiosis. In other words, teamwork. And they'll explain this. I'm not going to glaze over it. I'll read it and give it its due credit, guys. I'm not trying to make fun of this. I'm just trying to read what it says. Okay? Evidence supports the idea that eukaryotic cells are actually the descendants of separate prokaryotic cells that joined together. Okay, did you guys get that? In case you're not biologists or haven't studied this before or have no clue what's going on here, they are saying that two of these fellows here, prokaryotes, bacteria cells or archaea cells, joined together to form a eukaryote cell. In other words, a plant and or animal cell. Okay? Supports the idea, that joined together in a symbiotic union. Obviously, we know what symbiotes are. If you ever watch, say, Spider-Man and the whole Chronicles with what's the black fellow called? Venom, right? Venom and the other one, the red one, Carnage, symbiote relationship, right? In fact, the mitochondrion itself seems to be, and I'm not going to read this whole thing, of a free, so basically, in fact, the mitochondria itself seems to be like an ancestor of a free living bacterium that was engulfed by another cell. This is where things get weird, guys. Perhaps as a meal, and ended up staying as a sort of permanent house guest. Okay? The host cell profited from the chemical energy the mitochondrion produced. So you gotta remember, what they're basically saying is there was something that had a mitochondria, okay, one of these guys here, and one of these fellows munched on it, basically, okay? And the mitochondria benefited from the protected, nutrient-rich environment surrounding it. This kind of internal symbiosis, one organism taking a permanent residence inside another and eventually evolving into a single lineage, is called endosymbiosis. But remember, they're saying in the beginning, you only had these fellows here. You only had bacteria and or archaea cells, prokaryotes. So the idea is, two of these guys, got together in a process called endosymbiosis to create a whole generation of new cells called eukaryotes. In a nutshell, start with two independent bacteria. See? In other words, start with two bacteria, two prokaryotes. One bacterium engulfs the other, basically eating it. Does the one penetrate it? I don't know what's going on here, but it doesn't look good. One bacterium now lives inside the other. Both bacteria benefit from the arrangement, and then finally, you have this, they make babies, right? That's the gist of it. Okay? And the internal bacteria are passed on from generation to generation. Okay, yeah, sure, I guess. Sorry, that was very long. Okay, we're getting to the halfway point, though. And we're going to be, I think, done relatively soon with the boring stuff. So that is how, in their opinion, prokaryotic cells evolved into eukaryotic cells. Through a symbiotic union or a process called endosymbiosis. Right there. Right? Okay. However, the difficulty is that this process has never been observed between two prokaryote cells to create even one new eukaryotic cell. Unless I'm mistaken. But if I am mistaken, please show me a video on this, because I'd like to see these things in action. I'd like to see two bacteria getting together through endosymbiosis to create a non-bacteria cell. That'd be interesting. Okay, so, but the idea that this process between two prokaryotes created a eukaryote cell is a belief. Well, let me show you. It's a belief. But first, what's a belief? Well, here we go. The mental act, condition, or habit of placing trust or confidence in another. Mental acceptance of and conviction in the truth, actuality, or validity of something. Something believed or accepted as true, especially a particular tenet or a body of tenets accepted by a group or of persons. Okay? Belief, right? From thoughtco.com, I guess. Again, all the links will be in the description below, okay? I'm going to try not to leave any out. I'll try to label all the links too with what the point happens to be, okay? As life on Earth started to undergo evolution and become more complex, the simpler type of cell called a prokaryote underwent several changes over a long period of time to become eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotes are more complex and have many more parts than prokaryotes. It took several mutations and surviving natural selection for eukaryotes to evolve and become prevalent. And here we go. Scientists, believe. The journey from prokaryotes to eukaryotes was a result of small changes in structure and function over very long periods of time. There is a logical progression of change, for these cells to become more complex. Once eukaryotic cells had come into existence, they then could start forming colonies and eventually multicellular organisms with specialized cells. Okay, I'm not going to continue with the article because it's longer, right? I'm not going to go through all this stuff. All right. They talk about, a logical progression, but the problem is you have to get over the first step, which happens to be this concept of endosymbiosis. Okay? Basically the process of these two prokaryotic cells, remember, bacteria or archaea, getting together, kind of connecting together to form our eukaryotic cell, which again happens to be a plant or animal cell. All right, now I don't know the last time, ever, if ever, two bacteria got together to create a plant cell, for example, but hey, you know what? I don't know. All right. So, where are we here? The difficulty is that the process of endosymbiosis has never been observed. Okay? So guys, a belief, as we basically just read, is something one takes basically on faith. Okay? In fact, the idea that two prokaryote cells, remember, bacteria and or archaea, underwent endosymbiosis is called the endosymbiosis hypothesis. And it has some problems. Moving on, right? Now, you're probably thinking, who would possibly want to refute Darwinism? Well, you'd think this was a Christian article, but it's not. It's actually, I believe, a Muslim article written by Muslims, but you know what? The one thing we have in common is we both believe in God, but they do quote some serious stuff, okay? So anyway, I'm going to try to read the important parts because not all of this is that important. But this is not a short article, obviously, clearly. So I'll try to make a summarization of it. So what is the endosymbiosis hypothesis? Over a long period of time, the aerobes became mitochondria, no longer able to live on their own. So there's a little diagram, okay? You got your bacteria, your prokaryote, something with the mitochondria. Ooh, there you go. Something with a mitochondria in it. And finally, they connect together, and now you have a plant cell and or an animal cell. See that? These two guys get together, okay? Bacteria with another bacteria type cell. Remember, these are both prokaryotes. They're getting together, okay? And now you have plant cells and animal cells. Oopsie, what did I just do? Come on, get out of here. There you go. This hypothesis was put forward by Lynn Margulies in 1970 in her book, The Origin of Eukaryotic Cells. So she's trying to explain the origin of eukaryotic cells. Okay? 1 second, guys. The impossibility of plant cells having evolved from a bacterial cell has not prevented evolutionary biologists from producing speculative hypotheses, but experiments disprove these. The most popular of these is the endosymbiosis hypothesis. Okay, we just read this part, right? So the idea is that bacteria cells got together and created plant and animal cells, right? That's the gist of the theory. Okay, according to this theory, plant cells emerged when a photosynthetic bacterium was swallowed by another bacterial cell. The photosynthetic bacterium evolved inside the parent cell into a chloroplast. Lastly, organelles with highly complex structures such as the nucleus, the Golgi apparatus, the endoplasmic reticulum, and ribosomes evolved in some way or another. Thus, the plant cell was born. Now, guys, obviously, I have not read this book that's being referred to here, okay? Just to highlight it so everyone knows what we're talking about here. I have not read that book, so I don't know. But I'm assuming these guys know the basics. Unsurprisingly, it was criticized by scientists who carried out very important research into the subject on a number of grounds. And they have citations. Okay. And there's their citations, okay? Lloyd, Gray, Doolittle, Raff, and Maller. Okay? Okay. The endosymbiosis hypothesis is based on the fact that the mitochondria of animal cells and the chloroplasts of plant cells contain their own DNA, separate from the DNA in the nucleus of the parent cell. So on this basis, it is suggested that the mitochondria and chloroplasts were once independent, free-living cells. However, when chloroplasts are studied in detail, it can be seen that this claim is inconsistent. So then they go to the problems with this whole endosymbiosis theory or hypothesis. Okay, so I think I can just quickly burn through some of these. Okay. Or maybe not. Okay. I'm not exactly a speed reader, but I can kind of blaze through it in my head real quick. I think point 1 is pretty good. If chloroplasts in particular were once independent cells, then they're basically, remember, we're talking about basically independent bacterium cells, then there could only have been one outcome. If one were swallowed by a larger cell, namely, it would have been digested by the parent cell and used as food. Basically, this chloroplast would then be destroyed, is what they're getting at. This must be so because even if we assume that the parent cell in question took such a cell into itself from the outside by mistake, instead of intentionally ingesting it as food, nevertheless, the digestive enzymes in the parent cell would have destroyed it. Okay. Of course, some evolutionists have gotten around this obstacle by saying the digestive enzymes had disappeared. Weird, huh? I know, right? Where'd they go? Why'd they leave? Did they take off to McDonald's? But this is a clear contradiction, because if the cell's digestive enzymes had disappeared, then the cell would have died from a lack of nutrition. Guys, this makes sense to me. I mean, if I suddenly lost my ability to digest food and something entered my body, okay, yeah, I guess it's inside my body now, but if I can't eat anything, if I can't intake nutrients, I'm gonna die. If I die, I cannot pass on my new information in my body, can I? Okay. If I gain the information in my DNA to suddenly, I don't have extra limbs, but I die of starvation, how can I pass on my genetic code successfully? I can't. Okay. Moving on, okay? Again, let us assume that all the impossible happened and that the cell which is claimed to have been the ancestor of the chloroplast was swallowed by the parent cell. In this case, we are faced with another problem. The blueprints of all the organelles inside the cell are encoded in the DNA. If the parent cell were going to use other cells it swallowed as organelles, then it would be necessary for all of the information about them to be already present and encoded in its DNA. The DNA of the swallowed cells would have to process information belonging to the parent cell. Not only is such a situation impossible, the two complements of DNA belonging to the parent cell and the swallowed cell would also have to become compatible with each other afterwards, which is also clearly impossible. So, guys, that's why if you read about evolution and the concept behind it, it always requires billions of years to work. Okay, it always requires, at least a solid billion years to occur. Okay, so because if you just require it to, if you require it to occur quickly, it's going to seem impossible and it's going to be like magic. Okay. Got some pen mark on my hand. I'm trying to get it off. Got it. There's great harmony within the cell, which random mutations cannot account for. There are more than just one chloroplast and one mitochondrion in a cell. Their number rises or falls according to the activity level of the cell, just like with other organelles. The existence of DNA in the bodies of these organelles is also of use in reproduction. As the cell divides, all of the numerous chloroplasts divide too, and the cell division happens in a shorter time and more regularly. Okay. So let's see here. So it starts going into chloroplasts again. So we'll go back. We'll go here now. While the situation envisioned by the endosymbiosis hypothesis is occurring, through a process of trial and error, what effects would this have on the DNA of the parent cell? I believe the parent cell is the one that eats the other one. Okay, right? I think. As we have seen, any changes in a DNA molecule definitely does not result in a gain for that organism. On the contrary, any such mutation would certainly be harmful. In his book, The Roots of Life, this fellow here, whose name I'm not going to even bother to attempt to pronounce, explains the situation. You'll recall we learned that almost always a change in an organism's DNA is detrimental to it. Because we're basically talking about mutations, right? More or less mutations. And this can be seen in a lot of ways. Okay, this is present throughout biology. I don't think this is like a... let me highlight this here, guys. I don't think this is a hard concept. I think this is a very easy to accept concept. Okay? That is, it leads to a reduced capacity to survive. Reduced capacity to survive. So basically, if an organism cannot survive, it cannot reproduce. If it cannot reproduce, it's not going to spread its DNA. It's not going to create more of itself, right? If I can't reproduce, I'm not going to produce any more Pontarellis. That's all there is to it. By way of analogy, random additions of sentences to the plays of Shakespeare are not likely to improve them. The principle that DNA changes are harmful by virtue of reducing survival chances applies whether a change in DNA is caused by a mutation or some foreign genes we deliberately add to it. The claims put forward by evolutionists are not based on scientific experiments, because no such thing as one bacterium swallowing another has ever been observed. In his review of a later book by Margulies, Symbiosis and Cell Evolution, molecular biologist Whitfield describes the situation. And guys, this sums it up. Prokaryotic endocytosis is the cellular mechanism in which the whole of SET, serial endosymbiotic theory, presumably rests. If one prokaryote cell could not, let me highlight that for effect, guys. If one bacteria cell, prokaryote cell, right, or archaea cell, could not engulf another, it is difficult to imagine how endosymbiosis could be set up. Unfortunately for Margulies and serial endosymbiotic theory, no modern examples of prokaryotic endocytosis or endosymbiosis exist. No modern examples exist. In other words, at this point, we do not have any examples of two bacterium cells or two archaea cells getting together to produce a single plant and or animal cell. Okay, and they have their footnotes and their references below. Okay, not a whole lot, but hey, there you go. All right. Just want to give you guys a chance to breathe and take it all in, okay? While I adjust my hat and drink some water. Oopsie. There we go. So, where's all this coming from in my head? Again, I had a little chat back in the day when I was still on Facebook in this discussion group. And the group wasn't all about so-called Christian cults, which was the main focus of the group. But we'd occasionally have non-believers in the group who wanted to ask us questions like, why do you believe in God? And this one atheist basically quoted to me 1 Peter 3:15, which I already read earlier. And I'm like, okay, you want an answer, I'll give you an answer. But in my opinion, since you cannot empirically prove through the scientific method, at least at this point, because if God is real, he's a fourth dimensional being that exists outside of the physical universe. Although I could also argue that he interacts with the physical universe, and is obviously a part of it and has created it. How can you prove something that you cannot empirically test by sight, by sound, by smell, by taste, by touch? You can't. You cannot apply the scientific method to God, but you can apply the scientific method to things like the endosymbiotic process that would take two prokaryote cells and cause them to form a eukaryotic cell. And from what I'm reading and hearing, it's not going to happen. It's not statistically possible. Sounds like magic to me, guys. So I asked that question to him. I'm like, well, what's the first cell? He tells me it's the prokaryote, right? So we get into, okay, well, what did that turn into? Well, a eukaryote. How? Wait, I don't think he really wanted to talk to me at that point. So I looked it up for myself and said, oh, okay, well, it's called endosymbiosis. It's called endosymbiosis. And I'm like, buddy, from what I'm understanding, if you want to tell me it's scientific, that it's based upon the scientific method, that it can be falsified, the problem is the process has never been observed. It's never been observed. If you have no observable data to back something up, scientifically you have nothing. You're batting zero. Okay? That's all I can say at this point. The guy's batting zero. And once I brought that up to this guy in this group, he left. He was gone. He no longer wanted to discuss the topic with me anymore. That was it. At that point, I think it became personal, and he ended up leaving. But at that point, the topic was over, and I had won my point. What did I gain? Nothing. I hope I at least made him think, but maybe not. Guys, sometimes I think once a person has decided that they don't want to believe in a higher power, in a higher being of any kind, that's it. They're done. They've made up their minds. No amount of discussion, no arguments, no evidence is going to change their mind. So that's why I say to myself, flip it. Ask them, okay, why should I drop my belief in God? Why should I drop my belief in exchange for something that so far looks impossible? What else looks impossible while we're at it, in order to wrap this up? Hold on. Okay, so I forgot what I just said, but anyway, I was getting to abogenesis. I probably butchered that too, I'm very sorry. But, guys, in my opinion, the guy wanted to tell me that, the first living organism was, some type of prokaryotic cell, basically bacteria or archaea. And that somehow these things got together, made babies, and boom, you have eukaryotic cells, basically plant and animal cells. But going even further back, how did you get the prokaryote? So in evolutionary biology, abiogenesis, or informally the origin of life, is the natural process by which life has arisen from non-living matter, such as simple organic compounds. While the details of this process are still unknown, the prevailing scientific hypothesis is that the transition from non-living to living entities was not a single event, but an evolutionary process of increasing complexity that involved molecular, self-replication, self-assembly, autocatalysts, and the emergence of cell membranes. Although the occurrence of abiogenesis is uncontroversial among scientists, now guys, I have a hard time with it because you can look up scientists that are Christians. Okay, there are Christian scientists, so this whole thing is BS because, okay, so I'm not sure where Wikipedia gets this from, but this basically means that there's no possible believers in God in the scientific community, it's not true at all. So okay, so anyway, moving on. It's possible mechanisms are poorly understood. There are several principles and hypotheses for how abiogenesis could have occurred. So in other words, scientists have this belief, but they can't explain it. It's still in its infancy, basically. They can't explain this thing. Guys, one more thing, okay? One more thing. So I told this atheist, this non-believer, back in the day, back on Facebook, back in this group, that, I would become an atheist. I would become an atheist and drop my belief as soon as they could prove to me, scientifically, with no doubt, that abiogenesis is a thing, and so is steady state theory. Real quick, what is steady state theory? Steady state theory was a theory proposed in the 20th century cosmology to explain evidence that the universe was expanding, but still retain the core idea that the universe always looks the same and is therefore unchanging in practice, and has no beginning. No beginning. This idea has largely been discredited due to astronomical evidence that suggests that the universe is in fact changing over time. But the concept was, with steady state theory, the universe had always existed. It had no beginning. Okay? And then the Big Bang came along and took a cruddy dump all over steady state theory. So, prove steady state and prove abiogenesis, and I would become an atheist tomorrow. Now, this is not a God of the Gaps argument. Let me repeat myself. This is not a God of the Gaps argument. Okay? To say that I believe in God because we cannot explain the origins of life or even the universe, no, that's not why. But I wanted to start at this point because it's first important to note that if you want to say there's no need for a God because we can explain all this stuff through natural processes, well, my question is, well, what processes? What processes? People can't even explain the Big Bang with any real certainty. They certainly can't, validate abiogenesis. And basically this whole lesson, I guess, lecture if you want to call it a lecture, we can't even successfully go from prokaryotes to eukaryotes. It's never been observed. If the scientific method is based upon observation, observable evidence, being able to make an experiment, repeat the experiment, then there's no leg to stand on. There's no leg to stand on. Why would I want to dump something that, in my opinion, has more backing it up than than someone trying to tell me that, we started off as prokaryotes. Two prokaryotes got together, made babies, and created eukaryotes, which are essentially animal and plant cells, which make up the bulk of life on Earth. Okay? No. No. I'm sorry, no. That's my answer, no. If you cannot get me past that stage, I'm not going to dump my belief in God. Okay? It's not that my belief in God rests on doubt in, say, the Big Bang Theory or abiogenesis, but it's that I believe there's more compelling reasons and evidence and whatnot on the other side of the fence. I believe that there's a better defense for God than against. And if you guys are interested in hearing more of my defense and hearing more of my apologetic work in this field, let me know. Should I do a part 2? And if I do a part 2, it's going to be on probably the historical evidence supporting the existence of Jesus Christ as a real human being that really existed. Okay? So guys, let me know in the comments below. All right, as always, questions, comments, and constructive criticism down below in the comments. Okay? I'm not inclined to debate anymore because I'm getting too old. Life is too short. Okay, it really is. I've got more important things to think about than trying to prove a point. Even if you prove a point, so what? Even if I prove a point, so what? Can you get me through the idea that somehow prokaryotes turned into eukaryotes? If not, then where are you going to go with this whole thing? Okay? Where are you going to go? Someone might say, well, panspermia. And I'm going to say, well, you still have to create life from potentially non-living matter. You're just kicking the can down the road. That's all you're doing. You're kicking the can down the road. And the Big Bang already shot down the steady state theory, which was, in my opinion, after reading about it, was the non-believer's best bet. If the universe has always been here, then obviously the Bible's false, because, guys, Genesis chapter 1, right? In the beginning, God created. If the universe has always been here, then this whole thing is BS. The whole thing is garbage. But the Big Bang Theory shot down steady state theory like a dead dog on the highway. Suddenly, there's a beginning. And I got a book from a friend one time that basically claimed that the Big Bang was basically God's thumbprint. Basically, God saying, "Here I am. Reject me now if you dare." At the time, I didn't really appreciate the book because I'm like, well, yeah, but the Big Bang still is a scientific thing which still attempts to discredit God, but it had a point. There's a beginning. We know there was a beginning. Now it's just an argument over, was it God or did something else cause it? But today was about prokaryotes turning into eukaryotes. It never happened. Two bacteria did not get together and do the horizontal shuffle and create plant and animal cells. Endosymbiosis? Nah. Sorry. Just no. It's all theory. It's all hypothesis. But you need to follow the scientific method, which includes observations and then repeatable experiments, and it needs to be falsifiable. If you cannot falsify the information, if you cannot test it, it can't be proven. If it can't be proven, you're batting zero. So instead of trying to prove God through the Bible, which is not going to work, I'd be batting zero. I'm going to flip the question and ask, why should I dump my belief in God? And I think for now that's a good place to end this first video. Guys, if you want to see a part 2, I'll produce it, but don't worry, I'm still going to do interstellar pilot stuff. You know how inconsistent I happen to be. So, but I'll get back to it. Don't worry, I'm not done. I like the new miniseries, by the way, guys. I really do. So far it's good. But this came into my head as maybe something I should be doing, because if we are in the end times of Revelation from the Bible, then I think the field of the field of giving a reason for our faith is important, very important. I can preach to Christians and believers worldwide until I'm blue in the face, and hey, what am I really doing? I'm a universalist Christian. My whole goal has been to appeal to regular hellfire and brimstone believers to say, hey, what you believe is garbage, drop it, it's not helpful. But I'm probably not winning over any non-believers, so I gotta go further than that. And my approach might not be good, but it's the only one I have. Okay. Questions, comments, constructive criticism down below. Thank you for watching. 2021, no nuclear wars. God bless you guys. Hope you enjoyed. If you didn't, well, I don't blame you. Because this was kind of dry, huh?